So, where we left off, we were talking about how De las Casas was talking about how Columbus and the Spaniards were conceited because they treated the Native Americans as though the land was theirs and they weren't trespassing on the Native Americans' land. And we were discussing how we were writing that over here on the De las Casas side of our graphic organizer. And so now that we have modeled how to use the graphic organizer and find evidence, I want you guys to go and find some evidence on your own. And then we'll come back and we will review. So, some more evidence that you could have found if we're looking at the De las Casas source, we notice that they mention that Spaniards took infants from their mothers and they snatched them by the legs and they pitched them head first against crags, a rock face, or snatched them by the arms and threw them into rivers. So obviously, taking mothers and snatching their babies away from them is a pretty bad thing. And so, if we go back to our graphic organizer, that's another reason that we can give on the De las Casas side about why he thinks Columbus is a villain. And if we go back and look at the Barlow source, besides mentioning his courage and his perseverance, he also mentioned that Columbus, of course, extended commerce, which means trade, making money, because he found this new land. And of course, when they got there, they saw that the Native Americans had gold jewelry. So they were able to find all these resources and stuff that they could trade and become wealthy and make a lot of money. And also civilization, because of Columbus finding the Americas. More people were able to have that knowledge that they existed to migrate there. Hence, here we are today. So if we go back to our graphic organizer, we could again put that over here on the Barlow side. And now we can see how the articles are different. We know that Barlow looks at Columbus as a hero, and we know that De las Casas looks at him as a villain, and we've seen how the text shows us those differences between the articles as we looked at the positive stuff that Barlow talked about, like Columbus's navigational skills and his knowledge of geography and astronomy. And we looked at De las Casas mentioning what the Spaniards did to the natives and their children to explain why he was a villain. So now that we have completed our graphic organizer and we've analyzed those very interesting sources, we're now going to complete an exit slip. So I'm going to give you two additional sources. This time they're both going to be secondary sources. One is an essay written by Dr. Warren Carroll, and another one is an article about the Columbian Exchange. So your job is to do what we just did. Read those sources and analyze the text. Determine the perspective of the author. In other words, do they think Columbus was a hero or a villain? And what reasons or evidence do they give to support their answers? I want you to answer this exit slip using a Google form that I've created for you. Here it is. So the Google form, again, it says to read the secondary sources that I've provided for you, and you have two questions. The first one is, what is the perspective of both of the authors? And the second one says to list at least 2 pieces of evidence that they use to support their perspective or claim. Of course, you don't have to list just 2. You could list more. And that would be interesting to see you list more evidence and to see your thinking. That is it for this lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Columbus now that you've looked at these sources? Bye!